I was down here right here on this very river one night and spooked to death, and I'll tell you why. I had been over to the visitor center. I knew I was going to go up into the Cathedral Valley area of Capitol Reef National Park. And the lady who was working the desk said that her husband was a ranger for Capitol Reef National Park. He'd come up into this area just the night before to do some research. And as he got into his truck, he heard a thump in the back of his truck. So let's get into our lessons learned in the outdoors. If you like to cook, you know that salt, the right amount of salt, can bring flavor to food. Well, today we're going to talk about how the right kind of experiences in the outdoors can bring flavor and perspective to your life. I'm standing outside on a very cold morning. It's a sunny, beautiful morning in February, and so I'm dressed for the occasion. Behind me, you'll see the Henry Mountains. They're part of what is known as the last explored area of the continental United States. And this region surrounding this area is filled with some of the most incredible scenic wonders that you'll find anywhere in the world. I spent decades, perhaps hundreds, if not thousands of hours exploring this area. I've had some incredible experiences here. For a couple of decades, I'd wanted to get up on top of the Henry Mountains, and finally I had the opportunity to get to the highest peak of the Henrys, Mount Ellen, at over 11,000 feet. As I stood there on Mount Ellen, I had an experience that was very meaningful to me. I could look around 360 degrees on the compass, and every direction I looked, I could see something that I recognized and a place or a destination that I had experienced before. I looked to the southwest and I could see all the way to Bryce Canyon. I could see Boulder Mountain. I could see the whole Boulder Mountain Plateau, the highest wooded plateau in all of North America. And across from that to the north, I could see Thousand Lakes Mountain. Did you know that Thousand Lakes Mountain is actually Boulder Mountain? And Boulder Mountain should have been Thousand Lakes Mountain. A cartographer, maybe 100 years ago, got his name switched on a map, and it stuck that way. There are 80 lakes up on Boulder Mountain and just a handful of lakes on Thousand Lakes. And so as I stood there, I could remember that's Boulder Mountain that should be Thousand Lakes Mountain. As I looked to the north, I could see all the way over the San Rafael Swell. I could see in the foreground the Marscapes and Moonscapes that are so incredible parts of the Utah landscape. I could look off to the east and I could see all the way to the La Salle Mountains, out by Moab, Canyonlands, Arches National Park. And the La Salle is going up over 12,000 feet, close to 13,000 feet in elevation. Everywhere I looked on the points of the compass, I recognized things. I remembered stories that were meaningful to me. And that brought flavor, just like the salt, it brought flavor to my experience as I stood there on that mountain. I looked over my shoulder down to the southeast, and I could see almost all the way down to Lake Powell, or where Lake Powell would be, all the way down across the Henry Mountains in 3 different sections of the Henry Mountains. And I knew there were buffalo, free-roaming buffalo behind me. Everywhere I looked, I had already been. I could look just in the foreground to the east and see where Butch Cassidy, one of my favorite characters from history, hung out in Robber's Roost. Let me tell you one story, something that happened to me, that I stood there on this mountain and I looked down and I could remember this specific instance, and it brought more flavor and perspective to my experience standing there on that mountain. I was down here right here on this very river one night and spooked to death, and I'll tell you why. I had been over to the visitor center. I knew I was going to go up into the Cathedral Valley area of Capitol Reef National Park, and I'd gone to the visitor center to talk about the route and some of the details. And the lady who was working the desk said that her husband was a ranger for Capitol Reef National Park. He'd come up into this area just the night before to do some research. He'd gone back up into the canyons here and then come back to his truck, was parked on the other side of this river. And as he got into his truck, he heard a thump in the back of his truck. As he looked in the back, through the back window of his truck, he could see a mountain lion in the back of his truck. Well, imagine that story being told to you as you know you're going to explore this area. Well, I went up into the Capitol Reef area, did the Cathedral Valley loop. I got down here after dark to this river crossing. And imagine my concern as I came. It was springtime, the water was flowing much faster than it is right now. And I didn't know how deep it was and if my truck could make it across the river. Luckily I had an ATV in the back of my truck, and it was this main road right here. I pulled the ATV, I got out of my truck with fear and trepidation because I knew a mountain lion had jumped into the back of a guy's truck just the night before in the same area. I'm in this concealed area of willows or trees. I pulled the ATV out as quick as I could. I drove down the river just to check out the depth. It was fine. I came back across the river, loaded it back into the back of my truck. That all took some time. And then jumped back in my truck once I was secure. You can imagine the fear and trepidation I had as I was doing all of that here on the river. After getting my ATV back in the back of the truck, then I was able to drive my truck down this river, and it was a relief to be able to get back across this river and just in my truck, frankly. So how does this apply to us personally? When we climb to the top of something, if we don't spend time getting to know our friends, family, neighbors, work associates, and other good people around us, we'll never know the rich flavor, the salt-enhanced seasoning that comes from appreciating the people who are part of our lives. When we do, it gives us perspective. Synonyms to the word perspective are attitude, context, and viewpoint. Just as the right amount of salt can enhance the taste of food, our experiences will season and positively enhance our perspective. So that's our challenge for today. Go out and be the salt that brings flavor to life. That's our lessons learned in the outdoors. Thanks for joining us. We invite you to like, comment, and share.